We are in. Yeah, what's happening? That was kind of iffy. Oh my goodness. Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
We
We got
can.
you. Yes, we got
Why
you.
y'all
We are
why y'all
live.
acting why y'all acting all shy and silent? Whatever.
Like,
Hi.
I thought I was supposed to be on mute. I mean,
like Kwame, I'm not shy.
following
I'm just in the
instructions.
yeah, I'm just in the presence of greatness right here. I'm seeing Dr. Janay Brown-Wood here. I'm seeing Christine Platt here. I'm just like in the
Yeah.
presence of like
At all.
illumination.
Nah, Cornelius, I got my pen ready to take notes from the wisdom you about to drop on us today, so I'm ready.
Oh my
Wow.
God, y'all are setting the bar real high. This is gonna be an
Well,
interesting evening.
well, Facebook family, we love you. Like, oh my goodness, it is wonderful to
Yes.
see all of you here. Thank you for
Yes.
joining us for an evening of really powerful and timely conversation that we have all been looking around this planet, this country, and seeing what's going on with our babies. We have all been celebrating Black History Month, really taking time to invest in Black joy. And so we are so glad that we can extend that invitation to all of you in our Facebook family.
I gotta snap
Yeah,
it up for that.
you
What
like
he
real
said, what he
professional.
said.
You all fancy. You all fancy.
That's why I was on mute. Why I need to say something?
Hey, look. Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Gina, are we live? Like, we need to know. Are we good?
Yes, everything's great.
All right.
Everything's great. Everything's great. All right, y'all.
Let's
So look,
go.
it's me. It's my friends. We are gathered here today to have a conversation with y'all. We do this all the time. The last time the four of us were together, if y'all remember, I
Yes.
cooked for y'all,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
did.
And y'all stayed in my house a long time. I was like, when they leaving?
Right, you kicked us out, remember?
So mean.
I mean, but the food was good. How could we leave?
Right.
Food was good.
We were
Yes.
breaking bread, and we're gonna break bread tonight because tonight we are celebrating Black history. We are talking and teaching resistance. We are sharing why reading strong across America is important. So let's just get into this. I'm gonna introduce these special guests we have here. First off is my man Cornelius Minor, Brooklyn-based educator, part-time Pokemon trainer. Really? You put that in your bio? Why
Yes,
is that in
all
your
day.
bio?
All day. Yeah, these kids got to know. You can't step to me with the Pokemon cards and think you're going to win.
He works with teachers, school leaders, students, community-based organizations, supporting equitable literacy in cities across the globe. His latest book is called We Got This. He recently said, my job as a teacher is not to merely teach the curriculum or even just teach the students. It is to seek to understand my kids as completely as possible so that I can purposefully bend and remix curriculum to meet them. We got this because we got Cornelius Minor in the house. And I'm in the airport, so that's why y'all can probably hear all this stuff. Oh my goodness. I'm stuck in Aspen. All right. Dr. Janay Brown, award-winning children's book author, poet, educator, and scholar. Her first children's book was Imani's Moon, which was featured on Stephen Colbert's The Late Show.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Okay, it's gone. All right. All right. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, she's an author, an advocate who uses storytelling as a tool for social change. She's the author of many books. But currently, she serves as the communications director for the Clara Lionel Foundation. I love telling people this. It's like a nonprofit that's started by Rihanna. So she kind of works for Rihanna. That's dope. That's dope. More importantly, y'all.
Excuse me, my daughter.
More
I'm
importantly,
just saying, my daughter loves it. That's all. That's all. Go ahead, Kwame. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Most importantly, these are my friends who are all concerned about changing the world one word at a time. This is Black History Month. Let's dive right into this. Christine Platt, why do we need to teach? Why do we need to learn Black history? Tell us.
Yeah. I mean, the historian in me loves teaching and talking about the beautiful and complex history of the African diaspora. But I think that often we forget that Black history is also American history, is world history, right? Like these historical moments and touch points had lasting implications for more than just Black folks. So sure, there are some aspects of history that are uniquely ours, but whenever I'm asked about the need to teach Black history, I like to underscore the importance of teaching and learning whole histories, right? Because although the danger of a single narrative, I feel like it's pretty widely acknowledged. We hear that term all the time. There continues to be this sort of disconnect and understanding that the only way to counter single narratives is to introduce additional narratives, right? That collectively allow us to understand the whole histories of Black folks as well as others. And so for me, that's why it is just so crucial and so critical that we teach whole Black history.
That's why we're here today. We're here to examine
Yes.
and explore and inspire and engage with teachers, with librarians, with parents around these whole histories. And we're doing this under the guise of the Read Strong movement. And so I thought it was important that we begin this with each of you sharing, what does Read Strong mean to you, Cornelius?
Well, when we look around this world, we know how complicated it is. From our very first steps out of the crib or out of the stroller, kids see plants and animals and insects, and they're always asking, Mommy, what's that? Daddy, what's that? Grandma, what's that? That's kids beginning to read the world, right? So before we read the word, there is the world all around us that we're taking in. And we want kids to be inquisitive and thoughtful. But beyond that, we want young folks to be empathetic, right? And so reading strong to me means I'm not just interested in helping kids to understand the text that lives in books. I'm interested in helping kids to understand the text that lives down the block, the text that lives in the woods, the text that is the mountains, the text that is the clouds, right? All of that is really important for kids to understand and read. But in this fractured society, also the text that is my neighbor, the text that is the man down the block who, wears his hair differently than my father does. The text that is, the woman who runs the grocery store, who calls her deity by a different name than I do. All of those are important texts to be read, to be understood, to be connected to be loved. And so for me, that's really strong. Yeah.
So to sum that up, reading strong for you is about us being able to show our kids how to be more connected to who they are and to be more connected to each other, to become better human beings.
Exactly.
That's fire. Janay, Dr. Janay, what do you think?
Just to piggyback off what Corn said, to me, read strong means unapologetically, unrelentlessly reading books that interest us, that educate us, but not just that push us outside of our comfort zones and allow for us to learn more about ourselves, but also learn more about people who have different experiences than us. Because through them, just like what Cornelius was saying, we can start to build this empathy. We can start to look at our differences, but also look at our similarities and remind us that this is all the human experience. And that's what reading allows us to revel in, right? So to me, again, it's unapologetically, unrelentlessly reading books. But there's another piece to that, Kwame. It's also about unapologetically and unrelentlessly advocating so that everyone can find themselves in these books and that those same books end up everywhere. So any child can walk into a bookstore, a library, and see themselves reflected in a positive way. That's what it means to me to read strong.
Christine?
I mean, why do I have to go after these two? They have literally said everything, right? When I think of the Read Strong movement, and I'm just so grateful that this has become literally a movement. To me, it encapsulates everything when we talk about windows and mirrors, books being windows and mirrors. That is what Read Strong means to me. To your point, Janay, making sure that children can see themselves on the page. We understand how important that is, especially for young readers. And I think oftentimes we tend to focus so much on those books being, mirror books, but there's so much power in them being window books, to your point, Cornelius, right? Like this is an opportunity for children to literally see the world, see their neighbors, learn, explore. I mean, and it's one of the most accessible ways that we can do that. And so for me, that is what the Read Strong movement means to me.
So this is it. This is all encompassing, and I'll just sort of close out the Read Strong explanation, the setup, the kickoff, the jumpstart with this sort of mission statement. We want all of our children to know that they matter. That's why we need books that tell the whole history of who we are, how we got here, and what's possible for our tomorrow. Books that help us understand our own stories, the stories of our friends, our neighbors, and the stories of our country. Authors, teachers, parents, we ask you to join this movement to nurture and inspire the imagination and the strength of our children through reading books that matter, not banning them. Read strong. So with that said, let's just get right into it. There's a problem in this country, whether we're talking about Florida or Texas or Virginia or all over, there's something problematic happening. So let's dissect the problem. Let's get into it. Why do you think some school boards, some governors are having a problem with books like New Kid or Genderqueer? Corn?
You know, this isn't just a problem of today or of right now. This has been the conversation that America has been attempting to have with itself since the very beginning. The question of who are we, right? That there were people at one time who thought that we were a democracy or a half democracy, really, where only men, white men, landowning men voted, right? And that idea of who is an American was contested and voting rights were expanded and now they're being fought against, right? And so as we talk about literature, it's that same conversation. People are really grappling with what does it mean to be wholly human in this place, right? And there are people who are interested in making sure that definition only looks like them or their community, or only looks like their community looked 50 years ago. There's this really intense belief in American society and discourse where people see this as like, if somebody else got rights, that means I got less, right? And we know that that is not true. So if somebody else in a book, that means I'm not being represented. Or if somebody else is having joy and having a good time, that means I'm not having a good time. And really what we're seeing in these state boards, in these school boards is fear, right? It's people not being willing to look at an America that isn't necessarily changing, because America has always been queer. America has always been Black. America has always been poor. America has always been immigrant. So all of these things that folks are trying to ban are things that folks haven't necessarily wanted to take a good look at. And here's the thing, Kwame, the books are so good right now that kids are taking a look and enjoying what they see, right? And that's threatening to people who want to maintain a status quo that is male, that is white, that is moneyed, right?
So
Yeah.
that's so, Christine, here's what I'd ask you, is you've written for multiple audiences. You've written for the little ones, the middle schools, the adults. And so can you speak to the power, the ability of words to change the narrative, to empower students?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think to Cornelius's point, what the Department of Labor has already projected is that by 2043, this is about to be a very different country. We are about to be majority minority for the first time since this country was founded, right? And so I think that is where a lot of the fear is coming in. There is this shift in power that is unstoppable, right? And so, when I think about just the power of words and just how important it is now for us to be able to, put the right books into the right hands of children. I grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida. For any parents and educators who are watching, who are from Florida, it looked very different back then than it does presently. But the West Palm Beach Public Library was always there. And I just have such fond memories of going to that library and it being such an exciting and like educational and empowering place. And, you know, I had my little library card. That's like the first card many of us get that's like really ours that you can do something with, you know. And I would check out my own books or, you know, I would just curl up in one of the reading nooks and really use those stories as window books to peek into the lives of people and places that I was curious about. That as a poor little Black girl growing up in West Palm Beach, Florida, I would have never had an opportunity to go or see or learn about some of these places, right? And it was a safe and beautiful place to look into the lives of people and again places that I was curious about. And so I think books not only empower students, but they are also empowering tools to educate and enlighten the next generation. And that is always important, not just now, it's always been important. But I do think now, you know, more so than ever, as we confront book banning and other roadblocks to allowing children to explore learning through one of the most powerful and accessible modes of communication.
So, Dr. Janay,
can I add something to that? Yeah, you
go
know,
ahead. I got a follow
and
up, but go ahead.
okay, yeah, sure. I just also think about when it comes to book banning. So we talk about the power of the word. We talk about the power of the books. And so when you have all these books that are written by people from that population, right? A Black person writing about the Black experience, we get to shift the narrative away from that single story that we've heard so much. We get to now talk about the narrative of the Black child overcoming, but it's joyful, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't only have to be these negative things, these, you know, hardships, but it can be something like in my book, Imani's Moon, a young girl jumping to the moon.
Yeah.
So we get to shift that narrative and show young, in our case, Black children, oh yeah, one, you can be in magical realism too. And
Mm-hmm.
two, you can do impossible things like jump to the moon. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the power, right? That's the power of books. And to me, to use Cornelius's word, is threatening. It's
Mm-hmm.
threatening because it's giving those children this idea that you do have power. We're
Yeah.
showing you it through the pages of books. And so with them gaining this power, we see this shift of power. And that ignites that fear. So then you get this pushback by, no, we can't have those books. We can't have those books for whatever scapegoat or for whatever reason you want to say, right? But to me, it really goes back to this idea of power, putting that
Mm-hmm.
power in our kids' hands by saying, you really can do anything. And then, you know, using those books to fuel it. I want to share one example of this. With Imani's Moon, I remember I was sitting reading my book, and this little Black girl was sitting right in front of me. I was in a bookstore. She was crisscross applesauce. She had her own copy of Imani's Moon. It was open on her lap as I'm holding it up for everyone. She's flipping each page, looking up at me, just hearing the story of overcoming, bullying, reaching for the moon, and finally making it there, right? And then afterwards, she comes up to me and she says, my middle name is Imani. And to me, I felt like, yep, and you can do it too. You have that power. So then children start to internalize it. And so I just think that, oh, that gets me all riled up because that speaks to, it speaks to the power and it speaks to why it would threaten others.
Mm-hmm.
So this is real interesting to me because Christine mentioned that she found a safe and beautiful place, and you used the word threatening. And I'm curious to this question. Certainly, all the books you read, Christine, weren't pleasant and joyful and didn't make you smile. Certainly,
Mm-hmm.
all the books weren't just easy. Some of the books were challenging. I remember reading Man Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown. It's a hard book to read. It was hard.
For sure.
It was
For
hardcore.
sure.
And
Yeah.
so there's an argument, okay? There's an argument out in the world that these books that are being challenged are problematic, and they're being challenged because they're making white kids feel guilty, okay? That perhaps parents don't want their children to have to engage with such tough text, and they don't want them to feel bad about what's happened in the past, in particular slavery. So what would you say, Dr. Brown-Wood? See, I got the name right, Dr. Brown-Wood, don't mess with me. What would you say to parents who have this fear who feel threatened, who don't think it's that safe and beautiful place that Christine talked about?
Kwame, I saw this meme, and I'm sure others have seen it too. It was a meme, a Ruby Bridges meme, and it said that if this child was strong enough to survive it, your child is strong enough to learn about it. And so when I think about this question, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult. But that doesn't mean we shy away from engaging in those conversations. I mean, imagine if every parent shied away from the conversation of the birds and the bees. That would be a problem, right? Or having these conversations of something like death or grief. Children need those spaces to start talking about these things, because then parents can start to show them coping mechanisms to handle the emotions that they're feeling. So if you're feeling sad or upset or guilty, well, let's talk about that. Why might that be? And what are some strategies we can then utilize to help you cope with those emotions? That's really what I think is the important thing. For so many, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. But how do you handle that? You're going to be in situations in your life where you're uncomfortable. Does that mean you shouldn't? I mean, like a job interview. How many of us are like, yes, another job? And I love sweating bullets in front of someone who, like nobody.
Yeah.
But you have to learn how to cope with that.
Yeah.
So for those parents who are worried about that discomfort, that's okay. That discomfort's there. Now use that as a tool to help teach your child and build strategies of how to cope with that discomfort while helping them understand that this country is not perfect. This country has some issues that need to be addressed, but that you, young child, can be a part of the solution. That's where I'm coming from.
Can I just jump in a little bit here? Because
Yes.
let's say this. Oh, it's going to be a little controversial, but I mean, that's why I'm here. I honestly get really tired of hearing that argument, right? This idea that white children should not be uncomfortable or should not feel guilty when every other group that is represented in the classroom, their histories, their stories, their narratives are presented in ways and have historically been presented in ways that are harmful, that are embarrassing, that are hurtful, that are tragic. And such a singular narrative has been assigned to these baby stories. And the idea that a white child cannot feel a moment of discomfort learning about a singular narrative, right? When we're talking about that, when we're talking about them feeling guilty, we're talking about this singular narrative surrounding American slavery. To me, this is an opportunity for parents to introduce more narratives, to give a more holistic view of the role that white Americans and English indentured servants and all of these people who were complicit and compliant, right, in this system of labor. This is another opportunity for you to teach whole histories. Every white person did not participate in the institution of slavery, the harmful singular narrative institution of slavery, right? There were people who rebelled, there were people who resisted, there were people who literally helped runaway slaves, right? Like, this is an opportunity. If you are stuck on this singular narrative about American slavery and the roles that white folks played, you need some more narrative. You need a whole history. And then that discomfort will be mitigated, right? Because you will understand that is not just your sole and singular narrative in the institution of American slavery. Cornelius, I'm gonna let you jump in because I see you're like,
I'm just yesing you. Like, I mean, I'm over here at church with you and Dr. Brown-Wood. So like, one of the things that this is making me think about is the idea that a shame mind does not learn, right? That's the first thing we learn in teacher school, that like when your mind is feeling shame, you can't learn, right? And so I argue that any teaching that promotes guilt is not teaching, right? And so I think people are weaponizing that word guilt for political reasons. Like what some children are feeling is empathy,
Mhm.
you know, and so, you know, and so they're going home and they're saying, wow, there are stories that I never heard before. And now I feel the sadness of other folk. Or there are stories I never heard before, and now I feel the joy of other folks, right? And empathy is a complicated thing to carry, right? And you know, and I think often, you know, again, about that idea of discomfort, like you all said, like, you know, Kwame, you're a tennis player, you know, when you're first learning that serve, it's uncomfortable, but you go home, you sleep, you reflect, and you feel better the next morning, right? And so I always want to remind people, all they think about is the discomfort of the classroom, but they forget the go home, the sleep, the reflect, and you feel better in the morning because you see more stories, you know more stories. And so that's a powerful thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. So I I wish I wasn't the moderator. Y'all get to do all the talking.
Wait, Kwame, you can spit your
You get your
piece.
Yeah,
piece.
you
Go
get your
ahead.
piece. Yeah. I mean, and you know, and I'm so thinking about like An American Story, you know, that's been at the front of my brain, you know, in this whole conversation, right? That's the book that's done it for me. And that's really the book that is giving me life right now. Yeah.
So the conversation is heating up, not just here in this room, but on Facebook as well. The teachers are
Mhm.
engaged. And so Gina's gonna send me a few comments and I'll share them. But in the meantime, here's my question, because you brought up An American Story, which was a book that I wrote to help teachers teach slavery who felt completely uncomfortable teaching it. And so this is from a white male teacher, Cornelius, who says, my continual question is, how does someone who looks like myself, which he attach privileges, promote, share, and empower voices of color without usurping the power of those voices? What guidance or reassurance can you offer them?
Mhm. You know, I think about three things, Kwame, and this is for all teachers, you know, our white siblings, our white brothers and sisters in the teaching profession, as well as our teachers of color. The first thing that I want to do is I want to make text accessible. You know, Dr. Brown-Wood talked about the importance of having text in the classroom. And so the first thing is just access, right? Make text accessible, make them plentiful or as plentiful as we can afford. But then the second thing is allow children time to process. That often we want to step in and tell folk what to think or guide kids' interpretation. So allow children time to process while we simply stay in guard to prevent misinformation, right? And so I want kids to process, and I want kids to be in and processing is messy because you got to ask questions, you got to wonder, and you got to make theories. I just want to make sure that kids are safe from misinformation, but I allow them that time, right? So first access, second processing time, but then the third, and this one is really, really important, application. What do we do with what we just learned, right? So we just read An American Story, you know, and now what do we get to do with this? Right? How is our understanding changed? You know, I used to think this, but now I think this. And because I think this now, this is how I got to be in the world. This is how I hold myself. Right. And so that allows me as the teacher to get out of the way. Access, processing, application, because then the text comes to life and the kids take the next steps.
Love that.
Yeah.
Hi, Christine, I thought you were about to say something. Were you?
No, I mean, I think he covered it all. Like that was
Okay.
beautiful. Yeah.
Can
Thank you
I
so
add
much.
one thing though?
Mhm.
I loved that. Thank you, Corn. I also think, you know, as educators, we're supposed to be the experts. We're supposed to be the ones that know all the answers. But it's okay to be somewhat vulnerable.
Mhm.
It's okay to be like, I'm not 100% the expert on some of these experiences. Because then you can open up the space for your children from some of these backgrounds to then be the experts. And then you, as the teacher, can sit back and listen and learn and ask them questions. Tell me what you mean by that. I've never had that experience. Can you speak to that a little bit more? So I think allowing yourself as an educator to be a little bit vulnerable, one, it humanizes you, right? Because even teachers are humans. But it also allows, you know, it allows for that shift of power a little bit where your kids get to have that a little bit more of that expert opinion or expert ideas because you're allowing for that space. So some of that vulnerability is important. And I think too, as educators, we know about reflective teaching, then you also sit back and you reflect. You reflect about these things, right? And reflect about the environment that you've set. And I just feel like that sets the stage for that powerful learning and helping children feel like their voices are being heard.
Love that.
So here are some of the comments. I'll read a few of them, and then if you want to respond to any of them, you can. Books are the perfect place to work through uncomfortable topics and feelings. Tom says the lack of trust people are showing in young people to have these conversations. It's like they've never met a young person.
Love that.
Jennifer says, it burns me up. As a white married older teacher, I want my students to be better than our government officials. I am hopeful for the future. And then Anne says, my sense as a white person from a family that made it feel taboo to talk about race at all. I think the motive of those very organized parent groups is to make histories of and present examples of racial oppression unmentionable, and therefore to foster shame. So having some really engaged conversations on Facebook. So this leads me to my next question, you all. We get so focused on what is or isn't happening with white students and teachers, and Black students sometimes get left out of the discussion as if they are supposed to spend their lives resisting and protesting and speaking up and carrying that weight, Cornelius. That's a heavy weight to carry, Christine. So what do you say about that, Dr. Janay Brown? Or whomever wants to answer it.
Yeah, no, I just think setting a classroom environment, and it starts from the beginning, a respectful classroom environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing their experiences, opening up about their opinions. That's the starting point. Because then if you are able to do that, you're able to then allow for all the voices to be heard, whether it's the Black students, whether it's the white students. But you set this space of respect that it doesn't mean we have to agree. It doesn't mean I have to 100% be like, yup, just what you said. But I can respectfully push back and ask. And then both of us have an opportunity to grow from that, right? Me as the answerer, well, what about this? And the other student as a, well, I've never thought of that, but what about that? So I think going back to this idea of setting an environment of respect and compassion from the beginning, that makes some of these more difficult conversations so much easier. I'm not saying it makes them 100% easy, because again, they're uncomfortable, but it helps already. It's already modeled for students that in this space, we are a family, we are together, we don't have to agree. But we're going to use this respectful space to push the dialogue forward.
Absolutely.
Hey,
and Christine, I think all the time.
Christine,
okay.
Hold on, Corn.
Yeah.
I gotta Christine, Alnita Coulters just wrote, heard voices become powerful voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this whole conversation for me is just so powerful, and it just like I know you see me sitting here trying to allow Janay and Cornelius opportunity to speak, because I just want to just keep jumping right in. But I mean, I work as a trainer for the Anti-Defamation League, their No Place for Hate in Schools initiative. And, to follow up on what Janay was just saying, there are resources out there, even if you're not a No Place for Hate school yet, even if you haven't gotten that designation yet at your school, the resources are available online. And I just, working with young people, it just reminds you to what Tom said in the comments, right? It's like, have y'all never worked with young people before? I promise you, I can do an anti-racism course with adults, and it is a struggle, okay? I can do it with young people, and they're like, thank you for this information. What do I need to do next, right? The adults are like, is it really racist if I, always this struggle. And I like to liken adult minds. I should say this. I like to liken children's minds to perfectly moldable pieces of clay. This is our job as parents. This is our job as educators. This is anyone who is around young people, librarians, those of us in the classroom in any capacity. We have these perfectly moldable pieces of clay. And I like to think of adult minds as, they've been hardened and kindled by the fire, and it just takes a little more work to break them as possible. But young people give me so much hope and excitement and enthusiasm for the future. And I think that's why these conversations and the Read Strong movement is just so important, because they are the ones that got us. Cornelius, I'll let you go. I know you're about to say something.
I'm just smiling at all of y'all. Like, I mean, and just this whole, like, I just never want to forget that the foundation of all of this is Black joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Always.
I, as a classroom teacher, I consider myself a purveyor of Black joy, right? And here's what Black joy has given America, right? Black joy has given America jazz, right? Black joy has given America hip hop. Black joy has given America Gordon Parks and, and Octavia Butler, and name after name after name. And so when Black folks are joyful, everybody wins. Like, for real, like, our country is better. And so I really think about, in all of these conversations, I always want to bring it back to joy. And so when I'm talking about topics, even difficult ones, I want to remind kids that America has a habit of excluding women, but we get to be the ones that break the habit. That's joy, right? America has a habit of, putting Black folks at the bottom, but we get to be the one that break the habit. That's joy, right? America has a habit of second guessing our immigrant brothers and sisters, but we get to break that habit. That's joy, right? And so I always want to remind kids that, yeah, these difficult things are here, but we've been going through these difficult things, singing songs the whole way, making pies, right? We've been doing that, right? And so that's really exciting for me.
Love that.
I love that terminology, habit. That's a hopeful term, because as opposed to like set in stone, the rule, the bottom line, a habit you can break. It takes some time. What do they say? It takes 14 days until a habit is broken, whatever.
Exactly.
But a habit can be broken. And I just love what you said, because that feels so hopeful. And that's what we need, that hope.
Yeah. And kids are really good at it. Like, I try to quantify this in really digestible terms for kids. So I say to them, when they come to the class in the fall, America has a habit of letting men talk first. So in this classroom, before we open our mouths, we're going to look around to see if any of our sisters got something to say, right? Because we can break that habit in here, right? And people are like, okay, right? And so we can talk about how we break habits in here, and people feel good about that. They're like, look at Mr. Minor, we looked around and we checked for the sisters first, right? That's joy, right? When people can feel pride in breaking those habits. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's like we in church or something, y'all. Which I guess is the foundation for Black joy, is faith. That's the way we were able to have joy, is through the faith. The evidence of things unseen, the substance of things hoped for. And so I would ask you, what is your hope, each of you, for our educational system? What is your hope for authors? What can authors do? What is your hope for the teachers, for the parents? What is your hope?
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to start. I think simply for me, the hopeful side, it goes back to the dangers of a single narrative, right? My hope is that all of our stories, even the ones that make us uncomfortable, even those stories that make others uncomfortable, can be read, celebrated, and shared to ensure that we are teaching these whole histories. And I don't know, it kind of makes me, think about this idea of resistance and collective liberation and all of these things that we're working for and toward in this work that we're doing. And, I often have to remind myself to look at how much progress has been made over time, because in the moment, it often feels like change isn't happening, right? Like, it feels like, oh, our efforts are meaningless. But when we look at resistance movements over time, we understand that humanity has always been on this journey to collective liberation. Like, this has been going on for generations. And in the field, we often, we liken this work to the journey of the monarch butterflies. I don't know if you are familiar with that journey. And every autumn, millions of monarch butterflies, they migrate from North America and Canada, and they spend the winter in the forest of Southwest Mexico or something like that. And it's like a 3,000-mile journey. And the first generation of monarch butterflies, they're the offspring who they overwintered in Mexico, right? And I like to liken them to our ancestors, because it can take 3 to 4 generations to reach back to the shores of North America. So every monarch butterfly doesn't get to see the end of this journey. And I liken those successive generations to us and the work that we're doing. So when it comes to modern day resistance movements, those successive generations of monarch butterflies, I feel like they can teach us a lot of lessons, right? From, I don't know, sticking together to looking towards the sun, right? But one of the most, I think, beautiful takeaways from that journey is that the successive generation doesn't try to figure out what leg of the journey that they're on. So no matter whether they're the generation that's moving the next generation forward, or they're that lucky generation that's about to reach the shores of North America, they just keep going. And I think that's kind of what we have to do. We just have to keep going, keep resisting, keep moving forward, and just kind of knowing that inevitably we will reach this place of collective liberation.
I can go next. My piece is not as deep as that, Christine. But when I was sort of thinking about this question, my hope, it's the two pieces. It's what we've already talked about. It's joy. It's that Black joy. It's that idea that we can have just as many joyful stories as the ones that are difficult. And that way children can pick, and they can get that when they need this, and they can get that when they need this. So it's that joy, but it's also this idea of acceptance. My hope would be acceptance, that every child can find themselves on pages of books, and every child can walk in any space, just like what I was saying at the beginning of this, in any space, and find themselves and not have to worry, am I going to get in trouble for having this book? Not have to worry, is this book going to be banned and I have to hide it if I want it? So this idea of acceptance. And so I'm thinking again about when we were saying, what does read strong mean for us? And I want to parallel, or I want to tie it back again to this idea of joy. I think read strong also means this inherent element of joy. And it is, it's an action of rebellion to be joyful in the face of all the hardships that we have had to endure. So to me, I'm going to add that last piece, Kwame. Read strong also to me means unapologetically and unrelentlessly joyful.
I know I just spoke, but I just also want to say that sometimes the joy is not necessarily like learning about some happy moment in history. Sometimes the joy is learning about those aspects and parts of yourself that you've been waiting or hoping to find an answer for, even if it's painful, even if it's hurtful, even if it's uncomfortable. There's joy in finding that missing piece to the puzzle. You know?
But that's the nice thing about it. Your joy can be subjective. You can decide what that joy looks like for you. And so for me, joy might look different for someone else, but that's the nice thing, allowing for you to determine what that joy means for you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cornelius.
I'm just thinking about how we translate all of this to the classroom. I'm over here just like full of your warmth. I mean, Dr. Brown-Wood, your radiance, like I'm ready to go to school tomorrow and like get this Read Strong started. And I'm looking at our Facebook family, and I just wanted to leave them with a few things that they can think about for their classrooms, for their families, and for their communities. And so when I think about Read Strong, I think about it on several levels. I think about what's Read Strong for the grown folks, what's Read Strong for the young folks, right? And for our grown folks out there, I want to encourage you to read. Anytime books in your community are challenged, it's important to take a look at those books, read those books. Let's talk about why those books are being challenged, right? Because here's the interesting thing. The movement to silence books starts with the movement to silence you. So if we're not talking about these books, right, then our kids don't have access to them. So to sit in community and say, what is it about this book that bothers us? Let's talk about this. Like, what are our community values? What do we want for our children? Those conversations are important, but what often happens is people shy away from those conversations because they don't want any kind of like trouble, right? And so when people shy away from conversations, books, experiences are just erased over time, right? And for our young folks, Read Strong can be so many things. For our teachers and our parents out there, take time to wonder with kids. So encourage kids to ask questions and take time to make theories and seek answers, you know? And I think that's really, really important. I remember sitting with my father as a young person and seeing an unhoused person on the street and not knowing how to respond. And my father went to the library and checked out a book on poverty, and we sat together and we read it so that I could have my questions answered and so I could know what to do, right? And so time spent in community with our young people, teachers, parents, right? And then young people, here's what you can do to read strong. Young folks, you can ask your librarians for books by authors that you're interested in, right? You can go and discover like things and people that you've never seen before. So kids, keep asking questions and keep waiting for the answers. So you can remind your parents, your educators, your librarians, hey, I asked you this question yesterday and I got a little bit of an answer. Can I get some more? Right? Like, it's easy to ask for more candy. It's easy to ask for more cookies, but like we can also ask for more answers, right? And that's really exciting. So I am just looking out at our Facebook family, and I just want y'all to keep reading strong.
Hey, look, y'all are starting hashtags like hashtag break the habit, hashtag Black Euphoria. They even got a hashtag Christine got color-coded books. What's going on around here?
That's the Afro minimalist, y'all. That's what that is.
Hey, take us out with, tell us some of your books that we can all buy to read strong with. Start with Dr. Janay Brown, then Christine, then Cornelius.
Absolutely. So I have a few. I hope that's okay, Kwame. But if you're looking for like a Black history related book, I've got a Harriet Tubman Little Golden book that just came out. That's a really awesome one. But the one I want to share is Imani's Moon. It's actually my first book, and it's a story about perseverance. It's got magical realism. It's got messages of maternal uplifting, and it gives children, I like what you're saying, Cornelius, the opportunity to wonder.
Yeah.
So this is one of the books I would say, go out, check it out, look at the stars and the moon with your children, and enjoy what it has to offer.
All right. For me, I'm sure some of the educators out there, you are familiar with the Anna and Andrew series. It is a children's book series that teaches early readers about the history of the African diaspora. Anna and Andrew are my first book babies, and I love them very much. And all of those stories, even though they, touch on tough topics like slavery and well, just a number of things, they are all taught through the lens of joy. And those books are also available in Spanish. And so would love to offer those up. And then I also have a Shiro series. As like Cornelia said, I have a bunch of books out there, y'all. But I'm most excited about a new series that's coming called Frankie and Friends. I think you all saw the image that Kwame posted on the screen. That book is coming this fall, and it talks to children about the importance of journalism. And so it's very, very exciting. And so really, really looking forward to that. But again, there's so many wonderful, diverse books out there. So pick up mine or pick up others pick them up is what is most important. Go ahead, Cornelius.
And Facebook family, many of my books are for educators. And so my last book, We Got This, is my journey into equitable teaching. I write lots of curriculum and essays that you can find online. And I also write in community with other educators. I'm really excited about my partner, Cass Minor's forthcoming book, Teaching Fiercely, Spreading Joy and Justice in Our Schools. That will be out this May. And I'm excited about so many friends and colleagues that I feature in classroom, that Kwame's work is central in my classroom. I pull heavily from many of the authors at the Brown Bookshelf and at We Need Diverse Books. And so please be sure to check out all of our friends who are doing amazing things in the kidlit space. Yes.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. We had two really engaged teachers who were just commenting nonstop. Felicia Henderson, Darlene Estrell. Y'all are getting copies of An American Story.
Yay!
And the crossover, the Disney branded edition, which you can't see these books because my screen is blurred because again, I'm in the airport. But this has been amazing. Speaking of being in the airport, I feel like we just soared. Like y'all had us soaring with this knowledge and this wisdom, and we're all better for it. Thank you, Dr. Janay Brown. Thank you, Christine Minor. Thank you, Christine Platt. You are hosting next time so I can talk. Thank you so much, Cornelius Minor. I appreciate each of you. This will be recorded and it will be on YouTube. Hashtag Read Strong. Thank you, Gina and Sarah Grace, for your help. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Good night, everyone.